Naked and wet, leaning against the inside lip of her outdoor pool, Miley Cyrus poses on the cover of the October issue of Rolling Stone. "Good golly, Miss Miley," the cover proclaims. Her now infamous and infinite tongue extended, the 21-year-old pop icon licks her right shoulder and stares sensually into the eyes of her beholder. We are enthralled. In the past 7 years, Miley Cyrus has transformed from a tween idol into a sex symbol of sorts, and right before our very eyes. In a twist of irony, perhaps, the actor who once portrayed a 13-year-old living a double life, normal teen by day, illustrious pop star by night, seems to have found a way to reconcile, or at least re-present, her very public and private spheres under the gaze of an international audience. I just gazed at you and I lost my place. In this essay, I evaluate the polemical response to Cyrus in conversation with the gender critiques of Butler and Halberstam, Ahmed's reflections on affect, and assemblage theory. As I interpret her, Miley Cyrus, or my side, intentionally and unintentionally blurs the lines between public and private, feminine and masculine, performer, performance, child and adult, self and other. Ultimately, I argue that my side embodies the perpetuation of the binary gender system in popular culture and its impossibility, as well as the blurred lines, I know you want it, that trouble the very notion of a stable identity and haunt any endeavor to construct an unambiguous or ubiquitous ethics of relation. If everybody's already talking about Miley, as a good friend asserted when I told her of this project, I want to think about why, and how we might do so with greater theoretical integrity, political efficacy, and communal solidarity. Jack Halberstam's hypotheses in Gaga feminism are never far from my own, as he is articulating a new sort of feminism, invested in innovative deployments of femininity, I'm quoting here, and well represented by pop performances characterized by excess, ecstatic embrace of loss of control, and a maverick sense of bodily identity. I, however, want to begin with Butler. For without Judith Butler's feminist interventions, as we all know, and troubling of the freighted concept of gender/sex, there would be no Gaga feminism. Since the early 90s, theorizing of gender as performance has taken on alternative lifestyles, finally catching up to bodies. And we have Butler to thank for it. Working from Nietzsche's genealogical critique and his assertion that there's no doer behind the deed, Butler interrogates the practices, discourses, and systems which, through their appeal to origin, create the precarious conditions by where certain bodies are legitimated as human, as gendered, as normative, etc., and others are rendered unintelligible. The notion of intelligibility, or how we interpret bodies as such, is a common thread throughout Butler's work, and one of the reasons her work is of particular import to reading Miley. In Bodies That Matter, Butler addresses the masculine claim to originality, and the way in which the mimicry of so-called masculinity by bodies not apparently intelligible as such must be prohibited in order to maintain the air of essence or biological predetermination. Such constitutive constraints betray the way in which gender/sex is, quote, not an origin, but only the effect of prohibition, and therefore fundamentally dependent on that which it must exclude. Over 15 years later, in Frames of War, Butler interrogates the state-sanctioned defense of such essentialized body orders, writing, if we accept the insight that our very survival depends on the policing of a boundary, depends on not the policing of a boundary, the strategy of a certain sovereign in relation to its territory, but on recognizing how we are bound up with others, then this leads us to recognize the way in which we conceptualize the body. And I would add, in light of the permeable boundaries of popular culture and my side, to reconsider the becoming of body, as well as unbecoming bodies and the unbecoming of bodies in relation to one another, or in terms of assemblage. In Gaga feminism, as in The Clear Art of Failure, Halberstam mines the notion of failure in unbecoming bodies for its capacity to disrupt cultural conventions as, quote, a location for resisting, blocking, slowing, jamming the economy and the social stability that depends on it. Failure is a politically efficacious act and what he understands to be one of the most lethal weapons of the weak. For Halberstam, Lady Gaga serves as exemplar of such failure. I propose, however, that little Miss Miley might be going gaga beyond even gaga. For if Miley has succeeded at anything, it's failure. Time and again, she has failed in the eyes of disquieted parents, overwrought onlookers, cultural analysts, and critical race theorists. According to her critics on the right, the left, and the middle, Miley has failed to comprehend the responsibility she holds as a public persona. She has failed to adequately evolve as an artist, and she has failed to recognize and to honor Black women and Black culture. Shamed for her slide into infamy and ill repute, Cyrus has also been accused of leading throngs of young, influential tweens and teenagers down that same slippery slope. My parents tell me that I'm doing that all the time. And yet, one woman's white trash becomes another's treasure. For when interpreted through the frame of Gaga feminism, Miley's obstinacy and provocations might instead actually be rendered as, quote, a commitment to refuse the logic of rule, be it colonial, capitalist, feudal, or neoliberal. And this refusal is precisely, I would argue, what Miley is in all her performative acts and failures, twerking out right in front of us, and what makes and is making Miley so damn Wiley. Thank you so much for laughing, because that water sippage was like, okay. According to her critics, let's keep moving, she has failed to prove herself vocally and artistically. And Miley even failed to make it onto Jack Halberstam's inventory of the new figures of feminist fantasy. But she is indubitably the progeny of a particular pop culture lineage, a peculiar pedigree of provocateurs. Alliteration, anyone? And Cyrus, too, humbly locates herself here, honoring and adulating those iconoclasts who've gone before her, most recently Madge on MTV Unplugged, conceding that in a few years, another and another and another will emerge, by whom she might be rendered but a specter and a distant memory, yet to whom she will somehow be connected. Miley gets that she's doing something entirely new that's already been done before. And yet her difference marks a différance that cannot be overstated. For Miley is and is not like other female pop icons, such as Gaga, Madonna, Beyonce, and Britney, as well as other Disney girls gone wild like Lindsay Lohan and Amanda Bynes, who, due to the ubiquity of social media, transition, if you will, in various ways, some multiple times in the spotlight. As Ronan Farrow put it, she is, and this is just in this recent article in W Magazine, she is, quote, the personification of a new generation of fame. He put it, she's a human text message. I get into that. In the larger version of the paper, I get into that more because I'm looking at like cyborg stuff. Anyway, and as I see it, with Miley, we have been offered an all-access pass to a perfectly imperfect process marked by successful failures, and that makes all the difference. As the portrayals of female sexuality pervasive in pop music and media continue to be inflected by restrictive gender binaries and normative modes and models of intelligibility, Miley is doing it differently. Lady Gaga, renowned for her pioneering ingenuity in the creation and performance of queer characters, aptly opened the 213 VMAs what? As an Nova, right? She was an egg. But when Miley emerged, tongue wagging and twerking from the belly of the beast, or bear as it were, excuse me, she was tweaking with something much more than pop culture as art, or female representation in pop culture. Gaga had erupted onto the world stage, audaciously exposing her creepy, crazy queerness in a transformative moment of pop cultural historiography and feminism, according to Halberstam. But together we are witnessing Miley's metamorphosis, or anti-metamorphosis maybe, a performance or a movement, those are her words, of what could be considered maybe organized chaos. Technically, she only twerked for 4 seconds, right? But it's so much more than just a twerk that's got us talking. It's not like I twerk on Robin Thicke all the time, she says. It's a character. Miley is admittedly playing a part, right? Like Gaga performing a persona, just as she has been since she was a teen working for Disney, and yet it's personal. In her Disney Family sitcom, Miley was clearly performing a part. She was either Hannah Montana or Miley Cyrus, and when those boundary lines were blurred, drama would ensue. A drama that would, of course, be resolved sometime in the next half hour, give or take, right? What happened with Miley, the performer, person, and persona, once she outgrew Hannah Montana, however, one could not so easily predict. So when Maisa slithered her way down that staircase on the 213 VMAs and came out of that big bear's belly, only to tear off an already teeny tiny teddy and twerk it out for the world to see, she was also coming out to an audience expecting otherwise. While it began long before her twerk to blurred lines, in ripping off that bodysuit, Miley was flipping off her own sublimation and subjugation to the mouse and to the man. What we previously speculated about Miley was confirmed that exceptional August night. Miley was no longer a wholesome teenage girl to whom we could look to model for our daughters what it means to grow into a lady. She's Miley, and she's wild. And the reason Miley caught our eyes, commanded our attention, and creeped us out beyond even gaga is precisely because of her proximity. We're so ambivalent because we are invested in and in relation to her process in a very particular way. And her precarity haunts us. The magnitude and multitude of affective reactions, adverse and otherwise, in the wake of the twerk around the world leads me to Sarah Ahmed's The Cultural Politics of Emotion. Most especially her consideration of the push and pull of certain bodies. Of certain bodies on other bodies and our experience of disgust. Excuse me. What Butler proposed of bodies and gender, Ahmed asserts of disgust. It is culturally configured, performed and policed so as to appear inerrant or biological, and to be culturally embedded, and is deeply ambivalent. Disgust's ambivalence lies in the subject's contradictory impulses of desire for and aversion towards certain disgusting objects, objects that capture our attention and impose themselves upon us, making it hard not to sneak a second peek. Disgust, Ahmed writes, pulls us away from the object, while desire pulls us toward objects and opens us up to the bodies of others. In accordance with the economy of recognition, this is what Ahmed calls it, the economy of recognition, some bodies and their surfaces register as more sticky. In other words, they represent greater ambivalence and are therefore experienced as more disgusting than other bodies. It follows then that rather than describing an object's surface, Ahmed proposes stickiness be thought of as an effect of surfacing, an effect of histories of contact between bodies, objects, and signs. Ahmed is not thinking so much in terms of skin, of the skin of one individual literally touching another's, though such encounters are not precluded, but her greater concern is the socio-cultural and political manifestations of stickiness as a sign, which through repetition produces effects that parade as origin. So some of us adore her, some of us abhor her, but all of us are drawn to take another look, albeit in disdain or disgust. And most of us have something to say about Miley. Part of her act, her twerking, as well as her recruitment, or what has been called as her accessorizing of black women and little people, are offensive and even oppressive when evaluated in terms of cultural appropriation, racism, white privilege, economic exploitation. And Cyrus is being taken to task by certain critical race theorists and PhD candidates. You gotta go, guys. We're doing it. Such as Tressie Cottom, she's at Emory, who in her article, Black Bodies, White Wonderland, asserts that in order to celebrate herself, Miley uses other women as a joke. I both agree with Cottom and I want to challenge the assumption that Cyrus's actions are a celebration of herself, or that they display any sort of comfort in her own skin. In fact, it would appear that Miley is as uncomfortable within her own skin as the general public has been with her skin. And we are witnessing this public display of affectation as Maisa is in the midst of twerking it all out. So what bears emphasizing here, I believe, is that it is as important that all of these critiques are made and equally acknowledged as it is for us to reflect upon why we feel what we feel about her and how such feelings happen. My greater proposition then is that since we have absolutely no access to the origin of Miley's actions, and neither does she, considering Ahmed's theorizing of disgust as effectively sticky, alongside Butler and Halberstam might help us to better understand our reactions to her, and furthermore to consider how we might more critically respond. Miley herself may be doing something that matters to, with, and for bodies, but instead of viewing her as a discrete individual who is white, female, young, privileged, racist, perverted, extroverted, in opposition to other binary categorical qualifiers, it's actually more theoretically, politically, and even ethically responsible to read ourselves reading her. In this way, then, we might do well to consider what our reactions and interpretations of her reflect about us and our economies of recognition. For we are all implicated in some way in the production of meaning and culture, right? In short, we are making up Miley, or producing a discourse, as much as she is, really. In this way, then, her process and ours are best understood as constitutive and in terms of assemblage. Because it is equally as probable that, that what was experienced by Cotton as Miley's celebration of herself at the expense of another might also be interpreted as a politically subversive performance of blurred lines. It is our collective feelings about, of, and in relation to Miley that constitute an event, characteristic of our 21st century context, wherein Miley is never only Miley, originator of her actions and intentions, even as we are never simply individuals responding in isolation to a given stimuli. We are made in relationships and in relation to the World Wide Web of interdependence, because we're always already altered by and in our interactions. We might begin to think of our engagement then with Miley, as with all other bodies more broadly, as sticky and in terms of assemblage. That is, and here I'm quoting Puar, an ongoing process of arranging, organizing, or congealing how heterogeneous bodies, things, or concepts come in connection, not just contact with one another. Even as the complexities that inhere to categories such as gender, race, class, as well as the hegemonic economies of recognition that support them, must continually be interrogated. We are operating in a time when the very performance that might be understood as perpetuating such inequality, such inequity, and systems of domination might also be the very means to exploding them. For this reason, I propose that reframing the nomenclature "my side" might in effect help us think more critically and complexly about this phenomenon, in which if we're not interested, we are all in some sense implicated by being consumers and purveyors of social media and as postmodern feminists. Anyway, so post-feminism then, within this my side moment, like Gaga feminism, and this is, I'm quoting here Halberstam, looks into the shadows of history for its heroes and finds them loudly refusing the categories that have been assigned to them. These feminists are not becoming women in the sense of coming to consciousness, that they are unbecoming women in every sense. They undo the category rather than rounding it out. They dress it up and down, take it apart like a car engine, and then rebuild it so that it is louder and faster. This feminism is about improvisation, customization, and innovation. The Gaga feminist, or maybe my side, well, let's not go there yet. The Gaga feminist, in other words, cannot settle into the house that culture has built for her. No. She has to tear it down, reimagine the very meaning of house in form and function, and can only then she rebuild. This feminist with PH takes it upon herself to occupy gender. Gaga feminism, Halberstam proclaims, signals a new era of anti-corporate and anti-colonial struggle in which the form matters as much as the content. And the new movements of this new era, quote, turn politics into a performance and combine this anarchist mistrust of structure with queer notions of bodily riot and anti-normative disruption. Taking Miley at her word and understanding her performance as just that, not merely the sleazy, slutty slideshow of a fallen Disney starlet, although make no mistake, it is that as well, but a politically charged, palpably anarchist performance of bodily riot and anti-normative disruption, akin to and even inflected by Gaga feminism. And it exposes the fallacy of any origin, essence, or fixed gendered, racialized, class, etc. identity. In all her inordinance and indeterminacy, Miley Cyrus as my side performs as cyborgian goddess, possibly. This is Butler, that's her phrase. I love that. Anyway, so this is moving from hair away, right? Anyway, let's move on. The body space event in which intersectional identities and assemblages exist in tension. a becoming intersectional assemblage, who in touching and being touched by us occupies a space beyond and betwixt gender, bordering on the monstrous, grotesque perhaps only because we face an extremely close-up image of ourselves, like a selfie. You know, your nose is kind of we are indefinitely manifold, indiscriminately multiplying, and incessantly out of focus, plagued by bleeding and blurred lines. In conclusion, admittedly, my size is a sticky sort of girl, not just sticky, but messy. And it is a sticky sort of solidarity to which the messiness, or my-siness, of life calls us. In this way, my side becomes the fecund event space of our failed and unbecoming bodies. An apparition that haunts every attempt at material determinacy, an assemblage within which we are implicated and entangled, an androgyne drag queen perpetually on parade, and an affective embodiment of the ambiguity of real life. In her in-betwixt body, or in her in-between body, in-betwixt borders, by blurring the lines that institute intelligibility, my psi inhabits and troubles the very binaries that threaten to divide and destroy us. Though no single ethic can be universal, life is. And everywhere life is, it is in all ways, always diverse, dissident, and downright dirty. At the very least, thinking with and through my side might help us be a little more aware of and tender toward the messiness of life and the messiness of us. And at most, will blur the lines that divide the academy and the real world, bringing the wildness and wisdom of each to bear upon our messy existence, so that with all this talking, we might continue undoing things differently. You gotta admit, there's something to desire, something agonizingly delicious about inhabiting the interstices and pleasuring in the relinquishing or all-out demolition of social obligations to act or interpret bodies as such. I mean, even just for a few moments, don't you just kinda want to break down the barricades of these binary constructions and be a bare-naked deconstruction worker, barreling across the room, breaking through walls, swinging back and forth, coming in like a wrecking ball? I know I do.